And what the IPCC crowd will do is say, oh yeah, we said global warming, CO2 would cause these kind of shifts in the jet stream and would cause these more heavy weather events, but it wouldn't supposed to happen until 2080 or 2100 or something. But when we talk about solar activity, that is ferocious, it's fast, it's succinct, and it's laser pointed as to what's going to happen, and it's just swift downward changes, and this is what we're seeing.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
And I do welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Studio A, Revolution Radio, thank you for joining me. Incredible events over the last couple of weeks. It seems that the forecast uptick from Valentina Zarkova, Popov, Shepard, Zarkov, their research, as well as Dr. Abudzhamatov from the Pulkovo Observatory, John Casey, Rolf Witche, David Lapointe, and everybody in between is on the money for the uptick. The amount of uptick that we've seen in these last couple of weeks is astounding. Not only do we have the weather extremes coming in, but the economic extremes that it seems the global economy is hanging together by a thread as it was in 2009. China problems, export problems, tariffs, and it seems to be a distraction of really what's happening with our crop pricing. Now, you'll start to see a little bit downward trend on the prices because there's going to be more of that crop. So you generally see prices decline a little bit during the harvest season, and then when we're in the middle of the growth season, you'll start to see them rise due to the drawdowns and the lack of availability thereof of the crop. But if we can weave together a tapestry today, and I want to add in the last final ingredient, the censorship going on in YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook now to try to control the global narrative of all news moving forward. It's not just political news any longer. Anything that the thought police don't agree with at the tech companies is now just removed off of the internet. So as we move forward, we'll have to think of different ways, different platforms to start communicating, and I'll talk about a few of those here. So you can see where this is heading with the censorship. Right now it's politics, but in the future it's going to be about the weather because, as I've said from the beginning, there'll be a couple things happen. As we get closer to these global, I would say, food shortages, in the beginning we're going to get extensive price rises. But as we truly enter into a time when the following season won't have enough to feed the world globally, I was saying they're going to crash the economy on purpose. And you can start to see a lot of things lining up this direction already. You can't just crash an economy overnight without it affecting the persons who are trying to, direct the crash. So things have to be put in play. And as you see it around the world, the chess pieces are being moved. Everything from oil prices to Chinese consumption, U.S. exports, and everything in between seems to be right now, it is setting up. If you see what I see and why I would predict the crash coming up due to food pricing and trying to stave off civil unrest, that gives them an excuse to put police on the streets, army out. It'd be a great way to lock everything down pre-real trouble. But as always, I wanted to come up first with some of the events that are happening across the planet that the greater corporate mainstream media is not covering. Now, this affects your life as well as mine, and And this is the very reason that I do this program. It's because I want us all to be prepared. I'm in this with you. I'm not just some guy that has my own farm and I'm going to sit back in an underground bunker and hang out for 20 or 30 years by myself. That's impossible. That's not life. We all have to move through this through our lives, but they need to be abundant, fruitful, thriving existences during these times. And it's the same in every single gargantuan event on our planet, whether it be a stock market crash, whether it be an economic fallout, change of governments, whatever it is. Those who are a little bit forewarned position themselves that even during these times when everybody else loses almost everything, they continue to thrive in abundance during these times. And this is truly why I do this channel, why I spend my time putting this information together, networking with others to try to bring you this same information, because truly we're all in it together. And if you're more prepared, that helps everybody, including myself. So with that being said, I wanted to run through a few of the extreme events happening across the planet that just aren't making the global media in the mainstream because they're still pushing this global warming narrative. And everything that we're seeing, if it's a record rainfall event, which there's been so many now where countries and regions are getting 6 months worth of rain in a matter of hours. And what the IPCC crowd will do is say, oh yeah, we said global warming CO2 would cause these kind of shifts in the jet stream and would cause these more heavy weather events, but it wouldn't supposed to happen until 2080 or 2100 or something. But when we talk about solar activity, that is ferocious, it's fast, it's succinct, and it's laser pointed as to what's going to happen, and it's just swift downward changes, and this is what we're seeing. 3 or 4 years ago, if you heard about an atmospheric compression event where they would get a month worth of rain in like 2 days, and that was an astounding news fact. And then it would be 2 months worth of rain over a day as it started to move forward. 3 or 4 months later after that, you could see the uptick and the trend increasing in rainfall. And that was a wow factor back then. I even reported on that when I first started my channel. I'd be like, no way, a whole 2 months worth of rain in a day. That's exactly what would happen when the jet streams and cloud layers start moving out of their positions and colliding with each other. Galactic cosmic rays creating more clouds, but then those layers are going to be blending, so we get these massive, massive height in cloud layers, as well as moisture within that. And then moving on, you would see it would get 6 months of rain over 2 days, and that would be like, whoa, that is impossible when you would see these events come. That was a couple of years ago, and they were very infrequent, but when they did come, they were such shocking events that we need to report on them. But now we're getting 6 months worth of rain in 3 hours in 7 or 8 locations in a single week across the planet. Something has definitely upticked. And now we have rains in the desert in Oman where camels are trying to swim to safety, and lakes are forming all across Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia. But we saw the remnants of a hurricane moving up through Arizona, dropping all-time record rain. Bridges collapsing across Texas due to so much rain. They have 2 bridges that have actually collapsed, not from the water that was coming and flowing beneath from the river, but literally from the weight on the top coming down in such a barrage. But that was one of the strongest storms since the 1860s. But also in the Atlantic, the greater media, again, didn't cover this in earnest. One of the most powerful storms since 1840 rolled up over Portugal and Spain at the exact same time. And again, they were getting these all-time record rains. And then eastern Spain now about to get hammered by record rain. And the amounts that they're looking at, again, are multiple months of rain. But the weather front that's moving through has this enormous, and you can see it sticks out like a bubble formation within the front. And then behind it, there's a smaller secondary bubble formation, if you will, coming. But this is where the atmospheric compression events are happening, right in these bubbles. Now, if the weather's upticked and changed this much with our weakening magnetosphere to the point where we're getting these isolated cells of 70 miles wide, something like this, dropping months of rain in minutes or hours. It will be minutes in the future. I'm wondering when this is going to extend to the entire front itself, not just a pocket within the front. Because if we go down to the southern hemisphere, now the events I'm talking about so far have been the northern hemisphere. What if we transit the equator and head down to Australia? We saw this exact same thing. It was a front of atmospheric compression event. New South Wales, the hail was so intense that it hospitalized hundreds of people. Now, there's one exceptional event where a woman was with her child in a car, and the hail was so large and heavy that it smashed out the windows on all sides of the car. And as they took refuge, diving under the seats to try to protect themselves, the pictures of this woman after the emergency room visit, welts covered 80% of her body. And the others that had been hospitalized had head injuries, neck injuries, shoulder injuries, foot injuries, hand injuries from this hail that hit them when they were running to get out of the way. They had something like 340 calls, emergency calls for hail help from ambulances because of people hurt. And they have these saddening pictures of cockatoos that had their feathers stripped off that couldn't outrun the front. So you got to think, all right, the natural environment, these animals, they can sense fronts coming in. They're pretty good at that. You ever notice animals behave differently before massive thunderstorms come in? I mean, they're feeling the electrical changes. Now, you and your body can also pick up on these electrical changes too. Like a lot of people are very sensitive. Oh, my knee hurts before a storm. People who've had injuries. And then as it approaches, an hour or two out, you can actually feel the change in charge in the air, and you can feel the winds different, and the skies start to change color. Now, what caught all these animals by surprise? They couldn't even outrun this front, and they were killed by hail, that they didn't see it coming, or that it moved so fast that they were unable to get out of the way. Okay, I could understand the goats. They might still be in the field. But birds, they're pretty able to find their safe spaces. When I say safe space, I mean truly a safe harbor space from danger, not a safe space on the university campuses so we don't hurt your feelings. It's called a debate. And if you're going to hurt your feelings and you can't have a conversation, I'm sorry, you're not functional in society. But these cockatoos, they couldn't even run to their hiding places and their nesting areas to escape. So this is an example of an uptick in what we can expect in the springtime coming into the northern hemisphere. So I'm going to make a call saying that we're going to get these types of events. And you have to realize this went through New South Wales in a non-highly populated area. Atmospheric compression front, that's pretty much the only thing I can term it as. They had massive record rains, incredible winds up in the hurricane force winds, 90, 100 mile an hour winds, hailstones in the multi-pound range. But imagine if this were to roll through somewhere more populated in the States or Canada or Europe. It didn't roll over Sydney. It rolled over some more rural farming communities, and it's still that type of damage and injury to humans. That's really startling. Now, Niger, I'm going to take you down into West Africa here. You got Nigeria, you got Ghana, Togo, Benin, that whole area there. When we get up into Mauritania and the deserts, it has been nonstop rain and flood. So here in Niger, again, we have the same events happening, months worth of rain in just a few hours, and the floodwaters look to be about, I'm going to say a good 8 feet tall here. The buildings are covered all the way up to the roofs, right at the edge of the roofs, where the gutters would be. We want to talk about Dubrovnik in Croatia. 6 months worth of rain in 3 hours. In Tunisia, experiencing the same thing, 6 months worth of rain in 3 hours.
And since I have been talking about our need moving forward in this new society that we're entering as our global grain production starts to be reduced in yield, your food prices are going to skyrocket. And I mean skyrocket, not just doubling or tripling, something like 5 or 10 times higher by 2020 at the very least. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. They've been around since 1974, heirloom and organic seeds. Since I've started talking about them in my videos, I have a lot of people write and say that they've previously ordered, that they know the owner, having great results, good customer service. They quite enjoyed the seed quality as well. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. And we know the benefits of microgreens. All you have to do is use a search engine and look up vitamin, mineral, nutrient content of microgreens. You'll be shocked. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at trueleafmarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. And not only that, they have wheatgrass and grain seeds. So when I'm talking about grain growing regions going offline, we just need to look back in history and see where across the planet there was difficulty growing grains when this grand solar minimum intensified and the jet stream started wandering just like they're doing today, due to a decreased magnetosphere that does not hold our jet streams locked in their traditional flows. Grains are one thing, herb seeds are another, cover crops, something different, but whatever you do, organic seeds are going to be a necessity because you can save those seeds and then grow them the next season, which you unequivocally cannot do with GMO. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
Now notice the wide circumference of the area is not super giant. It didn't cover the entire country and flood out an entire nation. You have to see this place. I don't know if you have any type of search engine and take a look. Croatia is one of the most stunningly beautiful spots on our planet. Not only is the nature amazing with mountains, hiking, but the Adriatic Sea and the beaches, but then the towns have kept their, it looks like you're stepping back into really the 1300s, 1600s Europe. Slovenia, Croatia, Italy, that whole area has been just nonstop for the last 2 years. If it's not massive record snows, it's massive record rains. Farmers, how is affecting their crops? Because whatever's happening there first in this excessive point is eventually going to roll out to the rest of Europe. And how's that going to affect the crops in addition to the massive mega drought that's happening up in Estonia, Lithuania, Czech Republic, formerly the Czech lands back in the 1600s. That whole area, is having that massive drought. That's why the hunger stones are showing on the Elbe River. They're below even the 1616 low water mark, 1616 AD. So where right now they're seeing maybe a month of rain in a day or a month of rain in 6 hours or something like this, they can expect to continue amplifying as we move through 2019. 2020, 2021, is where the areas on the planet that are receiving these extremes year after year, how is it affecting the way that they transition to their agriculture? And see, this is the most important thing for me. The local farmers and growers in the area, they understand what's happening and they're already trying to transition due to the loss of their livelihoods, especially fruit growers and these types of people. So I want to know how they're transitioning, what they're thinking about transitioning to, how they're trying to protect themselves, how they're trying to protect their crops. Are they thinking about new crops? This is the information I want to get. Now, Tunisia also, 6 months worth of rain in hours. Turkey, 3 months worth of rain in 3 hours. So for some reason, it seems to have a lot of centrifugal effect on that particular place on the planet. Now, Tunisia and Italy and massive floods there in France and in Spain, and then you come over and then that target area right there with Croatia, Italy on the other side, you got Slovenia, and then right at the bottom you got Turkey. So what are the possibility of all those 5 countries right in that tiniest little regional area on the planet all experiencing these 6 months worth of rain in 3 hours events all in the same places? Is that like a nerve point, a center point of something that's a seed point, if you will? Because if we head over to Baffin Island, which is in northern Canada, just across from Greenland, just across the channel actually on the Davis Strait there, that was the seed point for the last glaciation on our planet, was the Baffin Island. So what they think is these ice arcs had formed and started to block the sea ice like we saw this year. We had ice arcs again. So basically you've seen arches, and when you in traditional architecture, you have those arches, those curved doorways, and you can put an enormous amount of load on top because the force is projecting upward, not downward. Now imagine a full-on channel from Greenland all the way over to Baffin Island with that same structure of ice, but it's an ice arch, and then it's backing up all the flows until it gets warm enough and it breaks through, and then you have this massive iceberg season. What's the knock-on effect of the ice arches backing up through all the channels in there and then backing up that main channel between Greenland and Baffin Island? Because that ice up there didn't melt really until, I'm going to say, late June, early July, and it was still 15 feet thick in June. In some of those places in the channels wandering through that whole estuary bay area is just choked with channels up there around Baffin Island. You got to realize that stuff stayed 15 feet thick until July. And here we are back into winter again with extreme temperatures, and kind of what movements or gears or mechanisms in our climate system over multi-centuries, multi-millennia does this have? Now, if it occurs again next year, what's it going to have on the amplification up there with the non-freezing or the non-melting? I don't know, to be determined, but definitely there's changes going on. And if it continues like this, let's say this year was the first year of the ice arches, and what if they continue every year? But every year they get much, much, much more intense, much thicker, much wider, much larger. That really does block the flows from even coming out of there until, say, July. What effect would that have? Because it starts to refreeze in September first week. So will it be a perpetual ice state up there? Contrary to the IPCC telling you that, coastal is going to be melting so fast and well, how did they hold on to 15-foot thick ice up there for so long this year? The ice rebounded to the 7th least amount of ice in the last, since the satellite record began. So a lot of changes that aren't making the mainstream media. And I encourage you to go check out places like Polar Portal. Some of these ice charts will take you back to 2005, and then you look and, we were told the ice would be less and less and less and less and less. But then this year, when you're looking at these charts, how does it come in with the 7th least amount of ice? It should be first, should it not? The IPCC and a lot of global monitoring stations seem to be not really putting that through their feeds. So you can check out the numbers on your own. I highly encourage you to do so. Polar Portal is a good stop. Danish Meteorological Association, the DMI, that's another great stop to take a look at the Arctic ice concentrations. There's a few others out there too. You can check out the Navy, U.S. Navy. They keep ice monitoring, obviously, because they need that for their subs. So they have a whole different, very, very, very technical set to take a look at if you can get into their Navy portal. Canadian Coast Guard keeps ice up there, and they have really good maps as well, all the way. They don't cover the entire Arctic Circle, but they do cover coastal Canada and the waterways, which I'm talking about on Baffin Island, out over to Greenland. And you can just check out the ice concentrations there. It's really interesting. I know how when my videos are being suppressed on YouTube, if they don't directly demonetize it, the number of likes exceeds 10%. But generally, through the history of my channel for the last 4 years, I only get usually between 3 to 5% likes on my video. But when you're seeing a video that's pulling over 10% likes, it means that the actual view count is being suppressed, but the likes are still churning along. But the view count that they're showing or giving credit for was talking about the extreme cold and the extreme snowfalls well above average. Most ice or most snow in 15 years in the Northern Hemisphere, specifically centered in United States. So when you take a look at a few of these maps, they're mainly North America centric. You'll take a look, 15-year highs on snow talked about the record cold. I mean, it is 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures, or it was in the last few days. You have to check out the temperature charts. Weather moves every day. So natural gas futures soaring as temperatures tumble. Windsor International Airport, 74-year cold record. And talking about these events, like San Antonio, Texas, setting all-time record cold temperatures, these types of events. I've been in Nepal twice. I've been to India 3 times trekking. I really like it. I don't go to the high mountains. I just love the beautiful views low. Cruising through the villages, just walking up the river valleys, and you can spend weeks or months up in there. I don't like to climb to the peaks. I don't like cold. But I do like the beautiful vistas and visiting local villages up in the trekking routes. And, one can lead to the next, and you can just stay up there for a longer time. It doesn't cost that much to trek. You can get healthy food if you look for it, and you'll find some cottage industries. I remember this one time we found a goat cheese up in Langtang Valley before it got wiped out by that earthquake and landslide back when Nepal had the huge quake. But they had a goat cheese manufacturing. It wasn't a giant thing. It was, the size of 2 or 3 houses, and a bunch of families were herding goats, and they brought it in and they made it into cheese. The trekkers would buy the cheese, and I swear it was some of the best cheese I've ever had in my life, hands down. Came in a teardrop shape. Yeah, incredible stuff. The reason I bring this story up from my personal experience is we would always go in October and November because that is the best season to go. There's never a cloud in the sky. It's always blue. And if there are clouds, they're little puffy white clouds that roll in the middle of the afternoon. I can't personally remember ever experiencing rain or snow during those times that I went trekking up there. And I've been up there 5 times. Now, Pakistan, you should see they got like 1.5 feet of snow, destroying the corn crops, understood. But then you had those mountain climbers up in Nepal, western Nepal, that got stuck under 4 feet of snow, and the trekkers in Nepal that were all trapped all over the place. 4 feet of snow, you can't walk through that. Try to walk through 4 feet of snow and see how far you get.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.